We know that feeling when you get Thanksgiving stuck with the family that insists on mall hopping, stuck in a car playing for the long road trip home. Don't worry, we've got this. This is the Android Police Podcast. It's Friday, November 29th. Season's greetings. I'm David Ruddick, and I guess we're probably going to say season's greetings for every episode until, I don't know, I guess New Year's or something. Also, like the intro sizzle reel there, Jules. It's pretty good. Joining me today is a Fujifilm lover, a recovering couch surfer, and an Android Authority editor and known video personality. It's David Imel.
Sure.
Come on, David. Everybody knows you on YouTube. You live the most amazing life. You just touch phones all day.
Oh, yeah. The most amazing life.
Yes, without a doubt. So you recently posted something that I thought was interesting because I thought would be a good discussion point. Jules did actually, but you were using the iPhone 11 Max Pro, and so I used it earlier this year too.
Yeah.
And I used it for a good month, and I was very impressed with a lot of things, and I still felt like I wanted to crawl out of my skin and leave after using it for that long. Where are you at with it?
I'm at this point where I think coming from the Pixel 4 and especially the Pixel 4. I didn't review the Pixel 4 directly before this. I had a couple phones in between, but just contrasting it to the Pixel 4 because the iPhone is obviously Apple's flagship and then the Pixel 4 is obviously Android's flagship. It does everything right that the Pixel 4 does so horribly wrong. So I think, and all of those things that the Pixel 4 kind of crashes and burns at are the things that I mostly care about. So having a battery that works is important for me. The iPhone 11 Pro Max specifically has super good battery. The versatility of the wide angle camera is very useful. I use it a lot. And most of my apps are available on iOS. Most of the apps that I use all the time anyway. Only a couple are not, like Relay for Reddit and a few others, but I'd say as an overall package, it's just very, very good. So it was very controversial for us to post a review on AA, and I know that I knew going in that we were going to get a crap load of comments. However, yes, but however, I think I remember you posting about this earlier, a couple of months ago, or maybe a month ago, saying that weirdly enough, the really this really cultist mentality that a lot of Android users has seemed to have kind of drifted with the iPhone 11 Pro series.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't know if it's just been over the years or just because the 11 Pro is so good, especially compared to Google's flagships currently. Not a lot of comments were actually that bad. Pretty much the only negative comments were iPhone Authority, Apple Authority, and that's not even really negative. It's just people being dumb. But there were a lot of comments that were I actually really appreciate that you reviewed this. And there were a lot, and I think that the positive to negative ratio is actually better on an iPhone review than on any random Android phone that I would review, and people felt the need to justify their purchase.
Yeah,
So
I think the tribalism, like you're saying, it's changing a little bit. I still think it's horribly rampant on YouTube, but I think that on websites like blogs and stuff, I don't think people care as much anymore.
Yeah. So we have a written review. I didn't actually do this particular written review. I do most of the written reviews that I do my videos for, but for this one, it was during the beginning of October, and I had a lot of other stuff to do. So one of my co-editors, Andrew Grush, did the written review for it, and he was telling me that all the comments were not that bad. But yeah, I mean, so this is my first iPhone, which is kind of weird, because I've never really used one before, but I did have an iPod Touch first generation. So that's the extent of my knowledge about iOS, but I guess it is not really that different from Android in the end, so it doesn't really matter. I don't know. I don't really understand the tribalism anymore, especially now, because what people want is what dictates how the market moves. And when people want the same thing across platforms, Android and iOS have like gotten really similar.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that there are some things that I still felt like with the platform that bugged me, like the way notifications are handled, which is to say they're not.
yeah, I had like a 2-minute section of my videos specifically dedicated to that.
It's so
Yeah.
bad. Like I don't understand why Apple doesn't just introduce like a real like way to manage notifications. Like they're so static you can never tell when you can actually interact with the notification ever. Like
Hmm.
unless it
Hmm.
literally pops up in front of you. That's the
Yeah.
only time it's like really obvious you can do something with it. And
Yeah.
so that really bugged me. And then I found a lot of things like just like I'm not like super anal about how my home screen is set up, but I do like a little bit of control over
Yeah.
it. And the iPhone is
Yeah.
just like, nope, don't get any, none.
Yeah. I'm just like a hyper minimalist in that like I don't really like anything being on my home screen like at all. And I just like want to hide everything in the app drawer. So and like the settings panel. So like the fact that everything is just there. And people that I've talked to have been like, "Oh, that's why you use folders." I think folders are just ugly as hell.
Yes, they are. They're so ugly.
Even on Android, when I use folders, one, they don't look like folders. They look like that circular, clear, round thing, which looks better. And then the other thing is on Android, you can have no name for it, so it's just a floating circle. But here, folders just like have letters attached to them, and it's like I don't know. It's just ugly. It's just ugly.
Yeah, it
The other
is.
thing is like the fact that you have to go into the settings app to access settings. I'm just like, why? Like, why didn't you just put that in the quick settings panel that you added in iOS 12? Um, yeah,
Yes, there are a lot of little things. And I think that like it's part of it's just adjusting, but part of it is also just straight up. I do miss some things. And I think
mm,
like, I use most of the major Google apps. And I feel like on iOS, a lot of them aren't as good, don't work as well a lot of the time. They feel like very web wrappery in some
mm,
instances. Like the
mhm,
Gmail app doesn't feel native to me. It feels very much like mobile Gmail, done on a very basic interface. So I do
yeah,
wonder with some apps like that. There are also things that I really loved about it. Like you said, the battery life is on that phone. I could not kill it in a single day.
yeah,
It was almost impossible.
yeah.
I don't know
No,
how you could.
I unplugged it at I think like 10 a.m. and it died the next day at like 9 p.m.
Yeah, 2 days was totally achievable with like pretty
Yeah,
average level
yeah,
usage.
yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah,
and I think a lot of things about it, like, you just realize that some developers like of third party apps, like just care more about iOS. And so things
yeah,
come there first and things are less
yeah.
buggy because they have to support fewer pieces of hardware in the first place.
Yeah. I'm not like I don't really own a lot of like cinema equipment or anything, but I keep up to date with that and how that works and a lot of like sliders and different things that you can control with your phone only have iOS apps. And there's quite a few things that are like that and it's just frustrating. So I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't stay on the iPhone long term if like the Pixel had amazing battery life or something. Um, because like Android as an interface, I still like a lot better. But now I'm
Yeah.
thinking like, should I just carry around an iPod Touch to like do the things that I can't do on Android?
I mean, I considered for a little while basically just, double fisting it and keeping, an iPhone and an Android phone together. And that was specifically for mostly the Apple Watch, which I think is something if you've never used an
Yeah.
iPhone, like after trying the Apple Watch, I'm like, you got to try it with the Apple Watch because it does enhance the experience even more
Mm,
in a way that makes Wear OS look really pathetic. But
yeah.
the other thing about it was like at the end of it, I came to realize like if I'm carrying two phones with me and both have mobile service, I probably will just use the Android phone unless the battery's dead. And so I was like,
Yeah.
I shouldn't keep this phone. Like
Well,
it doesn't actually make sense.
my thing is I just really don't want to deal with like dual notifications and
Yes.
also like I could get a Google Fi data only SIM as a secondary, but like why would I pull that much data? Like what I don't have unlimited. So pulling extra notification data for no reason is like, what's the point?
Yeah,
I'd rather keep it
absolutely.
just like off of data and then connect it to Wi-Fi when I need and deal with the fact that I'm going to get like 50,000 notifications in 2 seconds. But
Yeah, the other thing that drove me crazy pants, which is not a problem for a lot of our people
mm,
in this industry because a lot of you use Macs. I don't. So like
yeah.
password migration was an absolute nightmare to the point where I'm just like, I'm not logging into this site on this phone because I don't want to
Yeah.
deal with it.
Yeah, that's been an annoying thing, definitely. And and also, I was realizing the other day a big way that I would just like if I had a link on my phone and I wanted to get onto my computer, previously I could just like go to messages.android.com or something if I got texted a link and then just open that up. But I use Windows too. I don't use a Mac, and so I can't get my messages on my desktop. So I had to like figure out a workaround, like throwing, or I think it was like I needed a picture that I'd taken on my phone.
Yeah.
So my options were like download or upload to Google Drive and download on my computer, or like upload to Slack and download on my computer. And I'm just like, ugh,
Yeah, I just resorted to using Google Photos on the iPhone and just turning on automatic upload. That was the only real
yeah,
way to do it. I think the other thing about the experience that I haven't talked much about and didn't really, discuss on the podcast very much was the camera and how using
mm,
it is so much easier and
yeah,
faster and smoother and everything about it feels nicer. You
yeah.
know, the still quality of the images is below the Pixel in most situations, in my
Yeah,
opinion,
yeah, I agree.
but at the same time, like, it's so much easier to take pictures with the iPhone. Like, it's so snappy. The modes make perfect sense. The interface is super slick, super clean.
Yeah.
It's intuitive. And then obviously, as I'm sure you figured out, the video quality is just like
Oh, yeah.
leagues ahead.
Yeah, I was helping, Fisher shoot a couple clips, 2 days ago, and I was walking with my camera, which has optical image stabilization in the lens, and I just could not get it to be stable enough, so we ended up just using the iPhone, and it was amazing. And it's just like, you take a slight quality bump for that much, like, stabilization and ease of use, and it's just like, man, I should shoot, like, a lot of stuff that's not pure B-roll with the iPhone because
Yeah.
it really is, like, really useful.
Yeah,
So,
I
I
mean,
don't
the
know.
4K footage that they can shoot out now is like surprisingly competent. I remember when
Yeah, quite
they
good.
when they introduced 4K video on the original iPhone, and that was pretty impressive, but it still looked like phone footage. I
Yeah.
think now they've gotten to the point where it's like, you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference if you really didn't know much about cameras.
Well, so
Like,
my thing is, like, I between, like, this and, like, the Osmo Pocket, I still don't really understand why people have Osmo Pockets because it's, like, the same in my I don't know. It like, the Osmo Pocket is still, like, a smartphone sensor size, right?
yeah.
So why would you clip that into your phone instead of
I don't
just
know. I
using your
guess I
phone?
guess it uses less of the battery. Like, you won't drain your phone's
Mm,
batteries quickly. I mean, I guess not everybody's going to have the latest phone either, so
yeah. Yeah,
that would
that's
make
true.
sense.
That's true.
Yeah.
Uh, anyway, I feel bad, beating the iPhone 11 Pro horse to death because I realized that I'm extremely late with this review. Uh, I just wanted to get it out at all because, I don't know, I felt like I was looking at October and I was like, "What are we gonna have to cover?" And there was a lot less than last year, so I didn't feel as overwhelmed, but I was like, especially with the fact that that I heard that the 11 had, like, come up to the Pixel in terms of image quality almost, I felt like it was important to kinda, like, check it out and see how it did.
Yeah, I think so. And I think what I took away from the experience was, like you said, the things that the Pixel does wrong, the iPhone 11 does usually very well. I mean, there are
Yeah,
some things that I don't love about it, but
yeah,
the battery life, the camera experience, and general performance even is just like, it feels,
really good.
granted, iOS 13 has quite a few bugs that Apple
Yeah,
is trying to slowly stomp,
mhm.
but overall, you do get that sense of the polish that Apple brings to the product that makes Google's rough edges a lot more apparent, I feel
Yeah,
like.
yeah. I still miss, like, Google Assistant and
Yes.
just the dictation capabilities, specifically of the Pixel 4, is so freaking good. Like that was the first thing I think I noticed when I started using the Pixel 4 to review it, was because I voice text all the time when I'm like walking down the street, or if I'm like in a room. As long as I'm not like just on a train, even if I'm on train, I don't think I just really care. I voice text all the time. And on the Pixel 4, like, you can be in a noisy environment, and like the speed at which it picks it up. Like, there's an awesome Wall Street Journal video with Joanna Stern about like, she found the world's fastest like speakers, and had them use Pixel 4s to see if it could keep up with them. And like all but the absolute fastest person, it was like right in line with. And
Wow.
it's just crazy. It's so good.
She comes up with such great like plots
She
for
really does,
videos. Her
dude. Like
concepts are really strong.
her iPhone 11 review she did like at a Renaissance festival, and like the whole thing was just like seeing how it survived the Renaissance festival. And she's very smart in how she does that stuff.
She's very creative. Yeah, I definitely like watching her
Really
videos. And
creative.
now that Android Police has a publication-wide Wall Street Journal subscription, I can actually watch them.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've only seen their YouTube stuff really because of that. We
Yes.
should get
Yeah.
a subscription for that.
I convinced Art, I'm like, we pay for the information. I'm like, if you're gonna pay for the information, which is not a
Yeah.
thing I want to read
We
ever.
used to pay for the information. I think we got like one good story from it, and then from there it's like
It's really dropped off as a source for anything but like super like inside baseball, like Silicon Valley talk, which makes me want to throw up. So
yeah.
don't really pay
Well,
attention.
when I lived in Silicon Valley, it was like more relevant to me, I think. But I miss Silicon Valley a lot.
As somebody who lives there, I don't miss it very much at all. It's a place.
Well, I mean, how do you feel about New York though?
Oh, I would totally live in New York, apart from the part where it's cold, which is kind of my biggest issue with it. Granted, I would take New York over San Francisco every single day of the week, like no contest, not even a question.
You wanna switch housing situations with me?
Yeah, totally. I'm sure living with Michael Fisher is an absolutely wild ride. Um,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I'm sure that people would love to hear about. But before we do that, let me run an advertisement for ourselves.
Cliffhanger.
Android Police is live on Twitch 4 times a week. You can catch our live podcast like the one you're listening to right now at around noonish Pacific, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We can't do without your support. You can also catch the Q&A on Tuesdays, by the way. That's again, 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 12 p.m. on Twitch. Twitch.tv/Android, please. And if you want to help support us and you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, you can subscribe to us on Twitch for free. Once a month, you get one free Twitch Prime sub with your Amazon Prime account. And that actually does give us money, but you don't pay anything. It's totally free. So if you want to take money out of Jeff Bezos' wallet and put it into ours, I'm like totally for that. You can also do a paid subscription. Tier start at $5 a month, and you get a Rhine emoji, which is a thing that still mostly scares me. And you can learn more at twitch.tv/Android, please. And if you don't use Twitch and just listen to our audio show, which is unfortunately most of you, we'd love to see more of you on Twitch. Head to androidpolice.com and you can donate. Just say, hey, I really enjoyed the show. Here's a couple bucks. We totally appreciate that. We can give you a shout out on the show too if we see that. So thanks for listening, everybody, and I guess we'll get back to it. I want to thank our sponsor, ourselves. David, I think you've become something of a mild YouTube celebrity. I say mild because I think we're gonna have Marquez on the show next month, and I want to set the bar. But a lot of people follow you on YouTube and Instagram, and I think one of these people who have really kind of gotten into that tech influencer space a little bit. I don't mean that in a mean way. I can see by the look on your face. I do mean it in a mean way though. So you've recently adjusted and changed kind of your setup, and everybody kind of on the tech circuit knew you as the guy who basically couch surfed across media events for the last couple of years, I guess.
2 years.
It's been a little while. So why the switch?
it was a combination of things. There were a lot of people in my life that were like, "You need to get a place. You need to get a place." And I'm very easily influenced. I think it's because I had a lot of random, like, health issues that I mean, to be fair, I, like, went to the ER 3 times in a year, but they were all in countries where healthcare was free. So, actually,
Nicely done.
I would say that that was better. Um, yeah, I don't completely know. For the last couple of years, I've thought about living in New York, um, and it was just kind of, like, on my radar for a while, and I remember distinctly, after MWC this year or last year, I don't remember. I stayed in Europe for, like, 3 months because I was like, "Why not?" So I just kind of, like, jumped around different countries reviewing phones, uh, and I was in Rome, and I was just walking around, and I, like, passed the Colosseum, and then I passed, like, the Pantheon or whatever, and I was like, "Okay." And I wasn't, like, looking for things,
I
but I
passed
was
the
just
Pantheon and I was like, okay.
well, so I was like, "That looks like the Pantheon," and then I looked it up on Google Maps, and it ended up being the Pantheon. Yeah, it's kinda weird. But I remember walking around, and my friends were messaging in the group chat we have. They're like, "What are we doing this weekend? Like, are we hanging out? Are we doing this?" And I was like, "Why am I really here?" 'Cause I'd been kinda just traveling to travel because why not? Like, the thing is, like, with our jobs, we travel a lot, right? And I do most of the video for Android Authority, and we cover, like, every Android phone, so I'm in, like, China and then Europe and then somewhere else. And, like, for context, I have been in this apartment. Technically, the lease has been a month. I've been there for a week, and on Monday, I leave for 6 weeks. So, that kind of reasoning of, like, "Why the heck are you paying rent?" is why I left San Francisco to do this. Definitely questioning a lot right now and wondering why I did that in the first place, like, why I settled down again, because now I think it might just be a grass is always greener type situation, but, now I'm like, "Man, I am having a hard time adjusting to having a home." Uh, so, and the other thing was, so our good mutual friend, Michael Fisher, was also moving to New York, and I've thought about moving for a long time, and he said, "Hey, man, I'm moving." And I was like, "Well, you know, we do go to all the same events. He's a good friend of mine. He'd be a good roommate, and I've been thinking about trying New York for, like, a long time. So, I guess this is a good time to do it because otherwise I would have to live with random people, which is okay, but, you know, it's good to live with Michael." So, that's kinda the short end of it.
Oh, living with
I could
Michael
rant to
Fisher,
you for a very long time
great,
about my
great hair
positive and
fashion
negative decisions.
tips. But so, you are a person of strong opinions about cameras. And I am a
Yeah.
person who is easily influenced by people's strong opinions about cameras because I don't know enough about them.
Yeah.
So like, when I bought like my first like serious camera, which was like that's been 6 years now. My camera is six
Mm.
years old and I have not upgraded because I
Do you
don't
still have
use.
that Sony that has the fixed lens?
Yep, I still have a fixed lens RX10, the original one,
RX10.
which is like it's
It's dope.
fine. It's a cool camera. Like it works
Yeah.
like for outdoor photography, like where you're working with natural light, it's amazing. For indoor photography, like the sensor's showing its age, and so is the
Yeah.
processor. It's slow, there are things like that. And so I'm slightly getting the itch for an upgrade. And I keep telling myself that. I've been telling myself that for 2 years now, though. And you are obviously the big Fuji man in this business right now. I mean, like you've personally influenced other people into using Fuji
A
equipment.
lot of people, surprisingly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, when I look at Fuji, I'm like, I immediately like get I start to get anxious because I'm like, there's so many lenses. What do I do with all of them? It's like it seems to me like the whole appeals of Fuji is like you get to carry a billion lenses. And I'm like, I don't want to carry a billion lenses. I want one, maybe two, maybe two. Like I don't need a billion lenses. And obviously Ryan is now a huge Fuji fan because of you,
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
is constantly like taking very artsy shots of phones on his desk, be with for all of our hero images now.
You're
And so I'm
welcome.
like,
I'm glad that I
you,
contributed to upping the content quality on AndroidPolice.com.
oh yes. So I'm like sitting here thinking, and I'm like, do I just want like, I don't. Here's the thing, Fuji, like as you know, like is definitely the more economical option. That's what keeps
Yeah,
me like from pulling the trigger
they're
on
a lot
Sony.
cheaper. Yeah,
Yeah, Sony is like their mid like prosumer stuff has gotten so expensive, and I'm like, I don't. Do I really need full frame?
yeah,
Probably not. Like,
especially
I
for
don't think
what
I'm
we do.
yeah, for what we do, I don't think full frame is very helpful. I'm not, I'm not using it for video at all. And B, I'm not taking like, super moody like nighttime photos. It's not what the camera's being used for. And so I kind of go back where I'm like, okay, then Fuji maybe makes sense. And then I'm like, I look at the lenses and I'm like, there is no one everyday amazing lens, which is what Sony seems to cater more toward. They have a lot of good power zooms that are pretty flexible, whereas
Mm,
Fuji seems to go for like this lens is for this lens is for that, and these lenses are for all situations A through Z. And
kind of.
that's what I struggle with. So convince me that a person who doesn't want to care about cameras, should buy a Fuji.
Um, I mean, I might argue against the idea that there are no like all-around lenses for that Fuji sells. The kit lens that comes with the X-T3, if you like, well, it doesn't come with it, but they have a combo pack where you can pay $400 for a very good lens.
Mhm.
Uh, is actually very good, and most people that's an 18 to 55,
Yeah.
2.8 to I don't love it for the stuff that we do just because it is variable aperture, but it does have optical image stabilization. And one thing that Fujis don't do well is that the bodies don't have OIS. The XH1, which was like this one-off camera that they released like a year and a half ago, does have OIS, but it just looks like an icon. So it defeats the whole purpose. Like Fujifilm cameras, I think, and I don't want to be like a fanboy, even though I am a fanboy for them, kind of. Uh, the whole like idea is that they're smaller, they're lighter, um,
I like
and
that. That I
yeah,
like.
and they're more retro, so they're more tactile. And my first camera ever was a Panasonic GH5, and I hated it. Because I only started doing photography like 2 years ago, and I hated the GH5 so much because I pre-ordered it. Because like, I went to CES, and they announced it at CES, and the specs were, like, crazy, um, and I bought it, and I was like, "This is horrible to use. I hate this." Especially for photography, because like, I do video because it's part of my job and because it allows me to travel and go to events and stuff, and I love events, but I actually hate shooting video. It's not really my thing. I would prefer if I could just, like, take photos and write forever and then host, and someone else did the video for me.
That would be
Um,
nice.
but I feel like Fuji kinda strikes this nice balance between, like, if you like actually taking pictures, um, it is more tactile and it's more hands-on because there's a dial for everything. There's not just some weird, like, random unmarked, twist things with your finger. Like, everything has a dial, everything's manual, and if you're trying to learn how to do photography, Fujifilm cameras are, like, amazing for that.
Hmm, okay. See, I do
Yeah,
love I love the manual and tactile thing because I have my Sony always set to full manual for everything because I'm a control freak with everything I
me
use.
too. I
So
think
like
full
it's
manual is the best way to learn photography, though,
yeah,
because when people do even priority modes, um, it's, like, faster to do a priority mode, but you can't, like, get the shot that's in your head because
yes,
the camera is gonna interpret it differently, and this is why, kinda bringing it back to phones, this is why I hate phone cameras so much
yes,
because
that's part of it.
yeah, because phone manufacturers have this obsession with, dynamic range.
Yeah.
And I understand why people might want dynamic range, but nobody like not nobody. I understand why people would want dynamic range, but for me, photography is about you know, taking something that you have in your head that you see and turning it into an image. And when you just like raise the shadows of everything and dump the highlights of everything, you get this flat image.
Yeah.
And part of the artist, if I want to sound like an artistic hipster right now, artsy hipster boy, part of the artistic like capabilities of photography is that you get to control where the light goes. You get to control what is lit. You get to control like a lot, and it probably helps that my favorite my favorite photographers are people that use shadows a lot and that kind of stuff. So I've always hated phone cameras. Like there's this insane obsession with HDR. Um, yeah. So anyway, for Fuji cameras, I just think, especially the X-T3, I started on an X-T2 because I had the GH5 for like a month, and then I decided that I was like, I hate this. Let me go on Instagram and see who the photographers that I follow on Instagram, what cameras do they use? And weirdly enough, like 80% of them were using X-T2s from Fuji, which is strange because Fujifilm's kind of like a cult thing. It's it's very culty. Like people that, and I'm like a living example of this. Like anybody that uses Fuji will probably talk about it all the time. Like
It seems that
so,
way, yeah, and I mean, Ryan has
yeah.
tried to convince me over and over and over, "You have to get it," and I didn't even know, like, I didn't wasn't aware, like, they had a pretty decent kit lens because Ryan is about, like, buying
Mm.
every single possible fucking lens for the camera, and I'm
So
like,
I think
I don't care about fisheye, I don't care about macro." Doesn't matter
yeah,
to me.
I think that you honestly, I have been considering just buying a couple of their zooms and being done with it because they actually do have comparable zooms to Sony. They have a uh 16 to 55 2.8, and that's comparable to Sony's 24 to 70 because it's the equivalent focal length for APS-C versus full frame. Um they have an 55 to 200 2.8. So if you really need for events, that's great. And if I really wanted to, I could literally have those two lenses and be done with it. Um,
Yeah.
the reason I have a few lenses, I had 4 lenses for the last 2 years. I now have 3 because I broke one. Uh, I had a 23 f2 and a 35 f2, which are Fujicrons that Fujifilm makes. They're like this big. They're tiny as
Mhm.
hell, and they're f2, and they're cheap. They're $350.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so those are amazing lenses. I That's the lens I recommend everybody to get after the kit lens. Just because the quality above the kit lens is pretty decent, and then it's also cheap and small.
Yeah.
I had a 56 1.2 for like extremely low light situations, and then when I wanted to do portraits because it's like an 80 equivalent, and then I have an 80 millimeter macro that's a 2.8, which is what I use for actually a lot of my product photography. Um, whenever I post phone photography photos on Twitter, they always blow up, probably just because of the audience, but
Yeah.
a lot of those are taken with the macro because you can't really get phones in particular, but like tech stuff has a lot of little details that I think you really need to like highlight. And so the macros are really amazing for that.
Yeah, for product photography, yeah, you can get the fine details, and also I think you get the benefit of like the really short focal length. So everything you get that really, everything looks cleaner on a macro. The world
Yeah.
looks very matte, and so
Yeah.
I think that helps a lot with it.
Yeah.
That's something I learned. It took me a long time to learn about shooting products.
Yeah. And the Fuji 80 millimeter 2.8 macro is like one of the sharpest macro lenses in the business. It's kind of nuts.
Yeah.
Um,
So bringing it back to phones before
yeah,
we
sorry. I don't want
completely
to
go
lose
on. No,
everybody. I feel like we're gonna lose everyone.
it is my fault because I thought the discussion about what phone cameras do in terms of how they expose
Um,
things is interesting because I pretty much feel similarly. I have so much trouble with that word and I don't know why. I feel I have a similar opinion on the subject because I feel like every time it's definitely the problem with phone cameras for me has always been it's not what you see is what you get. It's, whatever comes out at the other end is what you get. And so it
Mhm.
makes it feel like every time you get a good picture out of your phone cam, you're like, oh, that was lucky.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
glad I'm glad that
yeah.
worked,
Uh-huh,
apparently,
uh-huh.
because phone cameras are so bad at so many things that, true, everybody says, oh, there's no need to have a dedicated camera anymore. Your phone camera is basically just as good. And I'm like, okay, I get what you're saying. I see where you're coming from, but
Yeah.
you're so wrong in
Yeah, I
every
know.
way. Like,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
yes, for 90% of people, they don't care. They're not looking close enough, or they're not taking the kind of photos that you would maybe want to hang on a wall. Like,
yeah. Right.
that's not the kind of
Yeah,
photography they're doing. And that's fine. If you're just, if it's just a documentary tool, if that's all you're
yeah,
doing is documenting life,
yeah.
then a phone camera is fine. Phone camera is the best camera because it's the only camera most people have.
Mhm.
But if you're like looking at photos qualitatively and you're saying, like, for example, one thing that has always bugged me about smartphones, try taking pictures of foliage with your phone. It is impossible to do it in
Yeah,
a way where it doesn't come out like this noisy, over
yeah,
sharpened, awful mess.
yeah,
And a
yeah,
real
yeah,
camera can do that. Like, a real camera
yeah,
can do that because it has enough resolution, it has enough, like, a wide enough data pipe, and the sensor is big enough, and the
yeah,
glass is better, and everything. And so there are so many things
yeah,
that come into play. And so that conversation about phone cameras does kind of grind my gears occasionally. We're like, no, 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 no.
yeah,
There's still so much farther for us to go.
yeah. I think what really bothers me is the fact that manufacturers, and I blame this on Sony and Samsung in particular for being the ones that are making the sensors. um, Everybody is using megapixels as a crutch, and the problem is that like resolution doesn't really say much about like what you need. Like for example, um you only need 8 megapixels to do 4K.
Right.
Uh so I think 12 megapixels is kind of the optimal. And there's a reason why and Google's actually traditionally been good about this. That's one thing that they've always done well because they're engineers, and Mark Lavoie, who like makes the Google Pixel camera software, it understands photography. He teaches like optics at Stanford. So he understands what he's talking about. Like the quality of the photo site on the sensor, like the size of it is way more important than the resolution. So for example, there's this Xiaomi camera that came out phone that came out recently, basically a camera. Uh that is the Xiaomi Mi Note 10, and it has a 108 megapixel sensor from Samsung. Uh and the sensor is, to their credit, bigger, quite a bit bigger. It is actually bigger than the Huawei P30 Pro or Mate 30 Pro's sensor, which was previously the biggest sensor. However, this photo sites are the same size as every other camera that's not a Huawei phone. Um, because they just were like, yeah, now we can pixel bin to 27 megapixels instead of pixel binning to 12. So like, but that's the biggest problem with smartphone cameras is the photo sites are so small that you cannot get enough data per photo site. And that's what makes everything look smudgy. It makes everything look flat. You just don't have enough information. So like Huawei, for example, the Mate 30 Pro's sensor is 1/6 of an inch. No, no,
1.6.
something. I trying to remember exactly. Basically, the Xiaomi sensor is bigger than it, but only slightly. And Huawei's camera is 40 megapixels. So that comparison of 40 megapixels versus 108, when the sensor's only slightly smaller, Huawei's photo sites are huge, and especially when they pixel bin. I'm pretty sure when they pixel bin, their photo sites are like over 2 microns, and continuously pixel bin's photo sites on pretty much every smartphone camera have been 1.6 microns. And like people don't get that making something higher resolution, like Xiaomi, for example, made this big deal about the fact that because it was 108 megapixels, you can print it on a billboard, which is like so misleading, right? Like
Yeah.
obviously people use medium format cameras to print on billboards, but one, resolution doesn't really have much to do with that. Pretty much anything over like 40 megapixels you could print on a huge billboard. Um, Two, like the image is gonna look freaking terrible. Like I don't know if you've probably you've compared the 40 megapixel mode on a Huawei phone versus the 10 megapixel mode that is like standard. Like on all these phones, they advertise like 108 megapixels, 40 megapixels, but when you just go into the camera and you hit the shutter button, default it's binning.
Yeah,
So because the image looks way better.
of
So
course.
there's no point in getting more sharpness if like the photo sites are just not capturing information.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think you're right about that. I think one of the reasons there's two reasons I think the manufacturers do it. And obviously we know number one, bigger numbers are gooder.
yeah,
I think that's just like this stupid, awful mentality. Unfortunately, that is I think endemic now to like the Asian smartphone market in particular. They're so
yeah,
obsessed with the bigger number.
yeah, yeah, and
The other
in the Indian market as well.
Yes. So I think the other thing is you do have that battle where every manufacturer knows that if you take a 48 megapixel photo on your sensor, even like so if you're not binning it, if you're taking it full resolution, you can do that zoom shot on the slide, comparing it to like another phone that is binning, and
Yeah,
say, look at how much more crisp and refined the fine details are. And it's like,
yeah,
well, nobody can see those at the size the photos being looked at. Like nobody's like, yes, if you wanted to print this on a billboard, yeah, you would want the unbinned version probably,
right.
I guess, but it's going to look crappy from either of them.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
The
Yeah,
unbinned one's just going to look marginally less crappy, I guess, probably. So that
yeah,
that does definitely bug me that they do this. It's absolutely become a bit of a race, and I think we've seen the solution. The solution isn't to increase, the number of pixels. The solution is just to put another camera on the phone. Like
yeah.
it's such a better way to do it, and
Well,
I think
so
most manufacturers realize that now.
that's for like for Zoom, right? And
Mhm.
this is another thing. Like, so when they make a 108 megapixel main sensor, and then all their advertising around it was, look how much you can crop in. It's basically zooming, and you're like, yeah, but you have a 3x zoom camera also.
Yeah,
So like, why are you? What's what? I don't know. It just is annoying. If you look at if you look at like like tradition like prosumer cameras, right? Sony in particular, they have the their A7 line. If you look at A7S2 and R2 and whatever, A7 II 24 megapixels, A7R2 48 megapixels, A7S S2 12 megapixels because they all have the same size sensor. So the 12 megapixel camera, this photo sites are going to be way bigger, and that
yeah,
the S line is made for low light photography and video. And I just, again, if you only need, um, if you only need 8 megapixels for 4K, like realize that we shouldn't stunt the growth of technology to avoid moving towards 8K, which needs like 32 megapixels or something. It's like
yeah.
quite a bit
Grows by
more.
4 each time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I realize we shouldn't like stunt that, but gosh, it's so yeah. I just hate smartphone manufacturers who just make cameras their main thing. So, I don't know. I
Yeah,
I wish
I think
Google would do the best of both because Google obviously has the best software and the best computational photography, and, like, their whole thing is, like, our camera could be 2 megapixels if our AI could interpret what that pixel is supposed to be, which is true. But, but if they had a big sensor like Huawei and they had the computational power that they have, they would be freaking killing it, like
Yeah, I think so. I think Google is like it does puzzle me that they limit themselves basically by saying, no, no, we'll choose the cheaper part. We're gonna make
yeah.
money on that end, and then we'll make up
Yeah.
for it with the computational stuff. And
Yeah,
we'll still
yeah.
beat everybody, but just by a little bit.
Yeah,
And
whereas they could be like Huawei, but not have the bad connotation of being Huawei and like just own the entire market
Yeah,
if they
that
actually
does
could,
annoy
you
me.
know?
It's one of those questions I wanted to ask Mark Levoy, but it's one of those questions where you know you're going to get like a jackass, smart, like totally snide remark from him. If you ask that
Yeah.
question, he'll just be like,
Yeah, I know. I
"We didn't
I
need
asked
it."
him about the lack of the ultra wide because I did this thing with him the week before the Pixel announcement about the computational photographies in Pixel 4, and I was like, "So you're obviously going to get slammed for the lack of a wide angle camera," and he was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Yeah, dude, like the iPhone has
It
it." He's like,
amazes me
"Well,
how like willfully naive they can be.
they said they talked to a bunch of photographers, and the next lens they would want is a telephoto," and it's like, "Well,
I agree with
sure."
that. Yes.
Yeah, I agree as well. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do all 3 when the rest of the market is, you know?
Yeah,
So, I don't
totally. Yeah, that is one of those things that does annoy me.
know.
I've gone on so many Pixel rants in the last like 8 episodes of the show,
Yeah,
but
sorry.
the camera on the Pixel 4
Uh,
is like this total like unfulfilled
yeah.
oh promise where it's just like, well, marginal improvement because we didn't want to put the more expensive parts in there to be like engineering that, and
And it was extremely marginal too.
it
And,
is.
I did this, selfie comparison with Mark Lavoie, when I was at the Pixel event where I had all the pixels with me, so I took a selfie with every camera with us in the photo, and I actually think the Pixel 1 looked the best because it
Oh.
had the least amount of, like, crazy HDR.
Yeah, yeah. I know Google has trended that way with the front-facing camera, especially. The front-facing camera like gets super poppy. I think it's because
Yeah.
they think that everybody wants their selfies to look like they were taken on an exotic tropical island. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But you
I
see, like, every pore on your face.
oh
It's
yes,
like
it's true. It is brutal. Like it is so unforgiving. They
yeah.
do have the beauty slider now at least, but like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's a little rough. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
never looked at picture taken of myself, selfie from the Pixel and gone, that looks nice. It's more like, oh, I'm horrifying, aren't I?
I've always just been like, "Okay, well, that's really sharp."
Yeah. I like take solace in the fact that most people's eyes are worse than this camera. So
Yeah,
softens everything out.
that's true.
Um So, like, now that you're going for 6 weeks, how many of those things can we talk about that you're doing? Um, how many are on?
Um,
We've got CES, obviously, bookending that.
well, Qualcomm Tech Summit, we can talk about
Yes.
the fact that it is happening.
Yes, we can talk about the
Um,
fact that's happening. There's going to be a new chip. I think everybody
yeah,
knows at this point.
yeah. So you and I will
Gets
be there.
yes,
Uh,
and that'll be fun. I'm
that'll be
looking
fun.
forward to that.
Round 3, round 3 for both of us,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to China afterwards for something that I cannot yet talk about. And then
Oh
I'm going
yeah,
to
Scott's
Japan.
going to that too. Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay, cool.
Going to
Yeah, well,
Japan. Oh, we lost your audio, unfortunately. We will try to. Nope, nothing. And now there are like little lines going through your video. Hold, please. Technical difficulties. Do, 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 do. David will be back in a short moment, which hopefully will be unnoticeable through the magic of editing. Still can't hear you. Oh, this is. Guess we have to start over, as the chat says. Going to try something else. Just hold with us here. God, we were almost through it. Looks like a swing and a miss. Well, we're almost through the episode, so I feel like it's not that big of a deal. For those of you who want to keep listening, you can stick with us for a few minutes here before we wrap things up. But I think hopefully we can get this figured out. And by we, I mean David. I'm in no way involved with figuring. Just going to look at some Fujifilm cameras while David works on this here, I guess. If anybody in the chat has any questions, of course, you can feel free to lob them at us unceremoniously. We will answer them to the best of our abilities, or maybe not the best, like the adequate of our abilities. Jules, I'm going to keep recording just in case. We may have to cut this early, but just leave it running for now. Wonder if there's anything exciting.
Okay, what if okay, this is my microphone, which is probably way worse. Yeah.
Okay. We will. I think Jules can do a little bit to clean it up in post, and honestly, it's just the last part of the discussion. We can wrap up in a few minutes.
Are you guys recording my audio on your end as well,
though? We can pull it from YouTube.
Okay, cool.
If necessary, yeah, we can do that. But if you can keep recording, that would also be good.
Okay, I will do that. Sorry. Anyway, let's keep talking.
Okay, so yeah, we've got Qualcomm, and then we've got thing we can't talk about, and then after that, you said you're going to Japan.
Yeah, so I've been there twice already. Mild flex, but but I'm going there again because whenever I have to travel for work to another country, I figure might as well go to a nearby country for a bit. And that's how I lived my life, literally. It was just like go to an event, go to a nearby country until I have to go to the next event and then go to another nearby country. But this time, so whenever I'm in Asia, I'm like, I should go somewhere. I am getting into film photography because I am a true
nerd
hipster.
Yeah.
And there's a camera called the Fujifilm TX1 that is also known as the Hasselblad X-Pan in the United States, because Fujifilm manufactured it for Hasselblad, and it was just branded differently in both countries. The one in Japan was gold, the one in the US and globally is black. So I'm going to Japan to find a Fuji version. Yeah. So
you're basically going to be like trolling Japan Craigslist, whatever that is. Like, I don't even know. Like, is there like Yahoo is a big thing there for selling stuff? I feel like.
Well, so they a popular thing to do in Japan is there's all these used camera markets that you can go, but I found out recently one of my favorite photographers did a review of this camera, which is very old camera because it's a film camera, but it's a medium format anamorphic rangefinder. Which is crazy. Panoramic rangefinder. So it's like this big, but sorry, you can't see that. It's like this big, but it's medium format, which is crazy. And then it like does these really narrow but long, basically anamorphic shots. It's super cool. Panoramic. And yeah, it's interesting. So he did a review of it because randomly he wanted to. He's a relatively popular Fujifilm person. And so after he did that, the prices on them started skyrocketing. And because of that, this one film camera store in Japan just went and bought up every single one they could find at the used camera markets and then like fixed them up and is now selling them. So I'm going to attempt to find one. But if I can't, then I guess I'm just gonna have to go to that camera store and buy an up-priced version. So
Interesting. Okay,
yeah,
that sounds like a Netflix documentary. If
yeah.
I'd
I
ever
mean, hey,
heard one.
I don't know why I didn't just start a second like travel YouTube channel or something. To be honest, um, yeah. But
Yeah,
so then I'm going from Japan. I'm going to home for Christmas, which is like San Francisco area, Nevada City, as I ranted to
so
you about on
Nevada City
Twitter.
is so close to San Francisco. It's right there.
I mean, it's 4 hours, but like, you know, nobody knows where it is. So I have
Like
to
saying
go
I live in New York City, but by the way, I live in Boston.
to Vermont. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. But, and then from there, I'm going to Seattle to spend New Year's with a friend, then CES, and then finally back to New York. So yeah, I'm gone for 6 weeks, which is a month and a half of rent that I won't be here for, which is great.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. I'm so looking
Yeah.
forward to CES in the sense that I'm not at all looking forward
I,
to CES.
this is the year specifically in which I just vehemently do not want to go. Like,
There's not going to be any news, and we all know it, especially for us. Like mobile news, like it's been getting
yeah, there's
thinner and
nothing.
thinner and thinner every year. And that
Yeah.
means I mean, honestly, we're mostly going for business side stuff. Like we're not
Yeah.
really going for content. Like we'll write some news, but I personally don't need to be there to do it. Like the only thing we
Yeah.
end up looking forward to is like going to a couple fancy restaurants that companies take us out to. And that ends up being the most exciting part of it. Also, I hate Las Vegas.
Yeah, me too. Yep.
Really, really terrible place.
Last year, I just had literally nothing to cover, and it was like, why are we doing this? I made 2 total videos, and one of them was like some really cheap Alcatel phone, and I was just like, this seems really pointless.
Oh yeah, totally. Like for video, especially for mobile stuff, you're slumming it super hard at CES at
Yeah.
this point. It's just not good. I think the last interesting thing to be unveiled at CES is probably the concept for the BlackBerry Key 2, which was
Yeah.
like I think that got some traction, but every show thereafter has been pretty terrible. Like
I heard about some people that are not going, so
I've heard
yeah.
about that too. I think in the mobile tech business, like we're seeing the number of attendees wind down. Like CES as a show, like really, you don't see many big companies make it like their announcement stage. It's much more of like, honestly, it's kind of a dick measuring contest for a lot of them anymore. Where they bring out a huge booth and they walk around a bunch of business partners and like vendors and like buyers and stuff. They're all there just to see. It's much more of a dog and pony show than I think
Yeah.
it used to be. Like I've been going for this will be my 9th CES, I think, which is awful.
Yeah.
And I know people who've been going way longer too. And I'd be curious to see what they think about that. I know some like Dell and Lenovo usually announce some stuff there.
Yeah,
I
Dell
feel like
usually
they're a pretty
announces
big
some
presence.
cool laptops and stuff.
Yeah.
Lenovo's always launching stuff.
Yeah.
I just think that like I feel like over the last decade, with the rise of smartphones, like all technology has shifted towards, apps and virtual everything. And because of that, there's less like cool, weird hardware. Like over time, there just hasn't been anything that's been like amazing and groundbreaking, and nothing surprises us anymore. And everything is just now like a new pair of headphones that has better sound, but it's not different. Or like, I mean, headphones is a bad example because drivers have been the same since they were made. But I don't know. There's just less cool gadgets. Like nothing surprises me anymore, and it feels like all technology is shifting towards like cloud computing and app-based things and that.
Yeah, which is hard to make interesting, honestly, for people. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing sexy about that. Like,
Yeah.
you like edge computing. Like it's not like
Yeah.
nobody knows what that means for one.
Right.
And for two, nobody's ever going to notice the benefit. Everything's become so marginal. Like, like basic, like for like an example you could use would be maybe like edge computing allows your phone to like if you order delivery or something. This might be a bad example because I'm making up as I go along, but like edge computing maybe like uses an algorithm to determine like, what is your more precise location and can generate a set of rules for the driver so that you know exactly where to go and like come up with instructions. And then it sends that off to the cloud and the driver gets it. Maybe the driver's edge computing capabilities like are able to
Yeah.
provide more information about where your order is and what's likely happening with it using the sensors in the phone. And like this is all stuff that would just make for like a marginally better customer experience where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that seems to work better now. But
Hmm.
nobody really cares about that. It's not
Yeah.
interesting. We care about the things we can touch and hold, and the things we touch and hold are increasingly like, well, it's better than the last one, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yep.
And
And it's like very marginally better, right?
yeah, and we see a lot of companies like kind of like flopping around, honestly, like trying to like make things interesting again. Like, I mean, I think that we can give credit where credit's due to Motorola and Samsung and say like with the folding phones, like legit engineering accomplishment, it's
Yeah.
genuinely different. I
Hmm.
don't know if I want it, but it is genuinely different. Like it's
Hmm.
it's it's a whole new thing. And
Yeah.
we haven't seen that in a lot of it. Like what's revolutionizing laptops? Nothing. Like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
basically the same.
Yeah.
Like the lap
I was very sad when it was funny because MWC this year, I think, was probably the most exciting MWC that I remember, specifically because it was all like random weird folding concepts. And, Huawei was supposed to release the Mate X, and Samsung was getting ready to release the Fold. And like those were the two players that were like pushing the market forward and like forcing everybody to make concepts and say they were going to do stuff. And like then Samsung started breaking and Huawei happened, and so because of that neither of them launched. I mean, the Fold launched way later, but the market just kind of like was like, oh, the two biggest players in the entire market that are trying to force us to make folding phones are delaying them. So I guess we can delay ours. And it went from like I literally felt like in February this year at MWC, I was like, this is the year that phones are going to be exciting to review again because they're all going to be new form factors, and whether or not it's more useful. Which, by the way, I love the Galaxy Fold, even if it's very impractical in certain ways. I still really like it. Um, I just got super excited. I was like, phones have gotten boring as hell. All phones are just Android is the same across all platforms now, and we review phones because of their cameras and their battery life, and that's kind of it. Like, and
yeah,
their body
pretty
design. That's like
pretty
it.
much. That's a fair point. And like for like consumers, like it's true. Like when we review phones now, it's become harder to provide like meaningful insight beyond
Mhm.
what you can read basically anywhere about a
Mhm.
product. The only time I feel like we can really be like, aha, is like when something is like brutally flawed about a product and we're
Right.
like, stay
Yeah.
away,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't touch
Yeah.
it. That tends to be what we end up like having to look at now. Whereas like even with the Pixel 4 XL, like when I tell people I'm like, don't buy it, even I have a hard time like coming up with like a list of 1, 2, 3 things where I'm like, well, here are the really big reasons you should avoid it. It's more like, well, it's not that it's a horrible phone. It's just that there are just way better ways to spend your
Right.
money.
And
Like
I
it's
think,
like
yeah. Yeah.
that's kind of where I've had to come down on it. And it's like you guys are being so hard on the Pixel. I'm like, no, it's more that I have to be because everybody else is just doing better. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the problem I've come back to. But it becomes true of all phones. Like, like Vivo sent me this NEX 5G phone like for China, which I can't even use. Like
Yeah.
and everybody's like, oh, well, that waterfall display thing looks pretty sick. And I'm like, I guess, but like it's basically like saying, wow, the rims on that car look pretty sick, but the steering wheel's on the wrong side and it doesn't actually have an engine in it. It doesn't go.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like it's not it's not a product
Yeah.
I could ever recommend to anybody or that I can
Yeah.
meaningfully use. So
That's it's something I have to deal with in the YouTube comments a lot because I'm pretty critical in my YouTube videos. Like I pull out the things that if it's a bad value, I you basically just when you're reviewing phones now, you have to compare them to the other options and like what they offer.
yeah,
And because of that, it can often sound like you're being pretty negative about a phone because you're like, yeah, like you're paying $900, $1,000, and it's got mediocre battery life, and the Samsung Galaxy S10 has a headphone jack, and people are be like, why are you even talking about other phones? You should just review this in a vacuum. And like, you can't, because
Yeah.
literally everything about a review now is you need to compare it against everything else that it is in the same price range
Yeah,
as.
this whole point of review is like to like help a buyer make a decision about the product. And it's like, well, I can't
Right.
help you make a decision if I don't let you understand and know like what the rest of the market kind of looks like, even if in a
Yeah.
vague sense. Like
Right.
it's very hard to do that. Like I would never, it would be like if you were to review cars and you're like, I've literally never reviewed cars before, but I'm reviewing a car and my opinion should be taken very seriously because I've written 5,000
Yeah.
words on car. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, no, I really do need your comparative knowledge to draw on
Yeah.
here.
Right. Right. Because yeah, at the end of the day, price is everything. Like you have to decide the pricing tier that it's in. It's why LG year after year seems to misprice their products at launch, and we all go like, "Oh God!" And then like 3 months later, there's a great deal on B&H where it's like $600, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is decent at $600."
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah, it's just like
totally.
yeah,
And then
I
it
don't know.
gets to the question of like when people like nitpick about like, oh, well, who cares if it doesn't get like, super fast update? And it's like, well, guess what? Like other companies are starting to care about that now. So yeah,
Yeah,
you have to harp on them.
right.
Like, and it's also that's always bugged me because it's like, listen, the one phone you guys all love to hate on, the iPhone, gets ultra fast updates because it's just the one phone Apple has to deal with.
And
And
for
it's so
4
yes,
years.
yes, for 4 or even 5 years sometimes, like,
Yeah,
it depends on the phone. So, like, saying that's not important in the, like, list of comparative benchmarking is, like, on its face, ridiculous.
right.
I've been dealing with
Yeah,
this for years, and I think that's finally, like, I've realized, yeah, like, it's just you have to it has to be part of the discussion,
yeah,
and people
yeah.
hate it.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
it's made it like it's made honestly it's made like being a phone reviewer kind of a slog, like because
Yeah.
when you're going through all these products that are so samey now, quite
Mhm,
honestly,
mhm.
and then you have something like the Galaxy Photo Fold or the Moto Razor, and with the Fold, you have to acknowledge that for most people, it's not a good form factor. It's not
Right.
practical. Like it'd be very difficult for a lot of people to live with, and
It
you
feels
also
like a
have
toy, but like
yes,
a fun gadgety toy.
yes, very gadgety, absolutely. But you have to, but then you still have this group of people like, oh, well, it's the first folding phone. It's amazing. And it's like, well, okay, yes, but
That doesn't
do
mean I
you
should
even?
recommend it to people when it costs $2,000 and they're gonna hate the form factor.
Yeah, and it's probably going to take forever to get updates. Apparently, like it's not going to get Android 10 until April.
Yeah.
Also, some of them has still broken, even with the fixes that Samsung has done. So it's hard to communicate this to people because oftentimes you're only getting a chance to communicate it in that one context, which is when you're talking specifically about that product, specifically to the audience interested in it.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, well, guys, I know you're here for this, but also I have a job of telling people like,
Right.
as
It's
a
my job.
product, like
Yeah.
how do I like say I can't recommend this, like with the
Yeah.
Razor, nobody should buy that phone. People will, like, I don't think anybody's going to need to buy it because quite honestly, like, battery's tiny, the form factor's unproven, it's an old processor, it's a terrible camera. Like I saw the sample vote, like sample screenshots people were sending. I was like, yikes. They're not
Yeah.
good. It's cool though, and I think
Yeah.
that's what
It's a gadget.
I was talking. Yeah, I was talking with who was I talking to about this earlier this week? Oh, I was talking with Chris Davies about this, like how smartphones don't have an analog to, like, in the car world. I use car analogies because it's another area I just understand and know a lot about. I don't mean to brag; I just mean I follow it religiously. But like in the car world, like there are everyday cars that 90% of people buy. Like those are
Yeah.
like your Priuses, your Camrys, your
Yeah.
Ford Focuses, and there are all these Hyundais and Kias, and all of those cars, like, actually a lot of them are very samey. Like
Yeah.
they achieve the same end goal. Like they seat 5 people, they have a trunk. There are a lot
Yeah.
of shared attributes. There are things that kind of level them over one another. You've got price, maybe fuel economy, reliability, warranty. Like there are little things.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, though, they're cars. Like they serve a basic function, which is to get you and possibly your stuff and other people a place.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
much as
Yeah.
like your phone's purpose is to be a window to the world. That's all
Yeah.
that's all it does.
Yeah.
And to be a camera. Like those are its two inherent functions. It's a
Right.
communicator and a window to, whatever you want to see and do. And
Yeah.
so as a tool, you have to evaluate it that way. But the thing in the car world is that you have also that extra 10% of people who aren't buying it as just a tool necessarily. Like you have
Yeah.
luxury cars, you have sports cars, you have exotic cars, you have classic cars, you have this whole range of other things that keep the world vibrant and interesting. And you don't have to be like, oh, well, this is clearly a great like this Porsche, GT3 is clearly a great cross shop with your, Kia Rio. Like nobody's going to be like, oh, well, that Porsche is not worth, 20 Kia Rios. Obviously, come
Yeah.
on, who's done the
Clearly.
math
Yeah.
here? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
have to worry about that. And so with phones, I wonder if we're going to get to this place where some people will be like, you know what, this is interesting and different enough that I want it just because it's interesting and different. Like, are we going to have that
Yeah.
like segment in the market carved out where you have people like, I'm willing to spend twice as much money to have something that looks really crazy? Like that could be
I
kind of
think
cool.
there already is. I think the people that are willing to spend more money are like, who is it? I think it was Max Weinbach told me that he saw some lady with a Galaxy Fold in a movie theater, and chances are, she just thinks it's awesome and wanted to buy it and likes gadgety things, and it's $2,000. So like for a regular consumer to be willing to take the bet to buy a Galaxy Fold for $2,000 is a big ask. And so, or another example, I mean, maybe this might not be as apt because he's a gadget reviewer. Michael Fisher, my now roommate, was telling me that he's gonna buy a Razor just because like he wants it. He doesn't care that it's like low spec or whatever, or like the camera sucks. He just like, it's cool, it's gadgety, it's interesting. And I think there is value in products being different and differentiated and like interesting that way. Another example is, I guess, if we take it back to Fujifilm for a second, they just released the X-Pro3, which is, if you've seen it, extremely polarizing because it got rid of the back LCD display in favor of an e-ink display that shows you your settings or the film simulation you're on. And then if you flip that down, there is an LCD. And it is like not practical for most people because most people want to be able to see their viewfinder and they want to be able to see what they just took. But it's also $2,000.
Yes,
so,
I see that. I'm looking at it now, and that product does not make much sense to me.
Exactly. Whereas the X-T3 is like, its retail is $1,400, but it's been on sale for the last couple of weeks for $1,200. It has better video capabilities. It does 4K 60, whereas the X-Pro3 does not. It has an HDMI out, whereas the X-Pro 3 does not. And just as a general overall camera, I think the market is much wider for them there. But they intentionally went off the rails and decided to like make this weird, very much let's try to make a film camera in a digital format. Because there is a market of people who just like that it's weirder and are willing to pay the money for it to be weirder.
Yeah.
I already get people asking me, is that a film camera? And with that camera, with the X-Pro3, like at every angle you see that camera at until you flip down the LCD display, you're going to think it's a film camera. Like,
yeah, it's true. The aesthetic definitely does sell that. So
yeah,
I think that's interesting. It's another good analogy. So I wonder if we will see the smartphone market do that. My thing has just always been that for most people, but this is true of cars too, is that like the current form factor we have is fine. It does the things we want it to do. There's not like, any big use case enabled by like these crazy foldable things. Like there's nothing that you can do with the Galaxy Fold that you really can't do with another phone. unless you're going to do some stupid demo of apps open side by side,
Yeah.
which is questionable utility to begin with. Like
Yeah.
that's just not how most people use computers anymore.
Well,
Like that's another thing. Like
yeah.
phones have systematically made all of our computers stupider because
Yeah.
everybody is used to monotasking now.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine. I think that's, kind of like where we've decided to take this technology because of the limitations of it, but also just because of like the fact that we're so like bound by the fact that this has to be something that fits in our pocket, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't know that foldables, like, and they're kind of like, if you could have a much bigger screen, I don't know that the advantage of that would actually play out in the ecosystem, because you would still have a massive ecosystem working against you saying 99% of people are monotasking. We design experiences around monotasking.
Mhm.
So it would be tough for the software to ever catch up in a meaningful way, I think. But I think you could have phones that maybe, I think the Razor is like a much smarter approach, which is
Mm.
say it's like the phone you have, but it's much smaller. Like it unfolds into something big. Like that's a much easier pitch for me to understand. Whereas Samsung's is like, well, can you imagine a world where this is useful? That's tougher.
Yeah, right. They have to. I think it's that discussion of like companies telling you what you want before you knew you wanted it. I guess like Samsung's kind of taking that approach of like nobody really asked for this, but we're doing it. Whereas like I think everybody can agree that their phone being smaller until they want it to be a regular size versus being a regular size before they want it to be huge is like
Yeah.
probably more practical.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other analogy, I know that we're running a little long, but the other analogy that is extremely apt and very relevant right now is the Tesla
Oh God.
Cybertruck. It's like horrid looking.
Yes.
And yet every single person that I've spoken, well, not every person, so many people on Twitter are like, it's different, I want it.
Yeah,
You know?
cars. So that's an interesting point. I would like to talk about this for just a minute because I've talked about this with
Yeah.
some people before. And this is
Yeah.
my argument like against the idea of the exotic smartphone. And my argument goes like this. With cars are a lot like watches. So people buy them because you buy something, crazy expensive and exotic and weird, not because you think it's a great product usually. You buy it because it's something to be seen and seen with. That's what sells a lot of these things. I mean, let's be honest. Watches are, for like men's watches, they're jewelry. There's no reason you should spend $30,000 on a men's watch, but tons of guys do. I shouldn't say tons. Many guys do, and it's because, well, it's like there's a resale market, and B, because it's a fashion accessory and you're paying for an aesthetic, a look, a brand, a name. It's the same reason a lot of people buy really expensive cars. Like,
Yeah.
because if nobody could see that car, if you had to keep that car in your pocket, like, or, just in a garage where nobody could see it, you probably wouldn't buy it. And that's like
Yeah.
not even like counting the whole functional side of it. It's a thing to be seen and seen, having to be seen with, to show your means. And that's not true of everybody who buys them, but let's be real, that's what drives the market.
Yeah.
So, and when I look at phones, I'm like, this is something you keep in your pocket. It's something that most people really won't ever see. They
Mhm.
get a glance of it. It's very personal. 99% of the time when you see somebody using a phone, what do you see? You see a screen. Like that's all you see.
Yeah.
And it's like every other screen in the world. Like it's not like a car or even a
Well,
watch where
I
you're
mean, you
like,
can make the
this is
argument that like
special.
the iPhone having one of the first ugly notches, if you don't count the the Motorola phone that did it before
Yeah.
them, like that was iconic for a very long time. It was like whether or not you liked the look of it, people knew you had an iPhone,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, definitely. That was, but I think that's, it's just because we see so many phones. And so that was like noticeably a little different. Now we're this total white noise to everybody.
Yeah,
Notches
yeah,
are like, nobody pays attention anymore.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's kind of my argument against, like, because
It's
I
the
feel
same thing
like,
with the triple camera that looks pretty ugly on the iPhone, and everyone's kind of gotten used to it and thinks that it is fine now.
yeah,
It's very
I
weird
think
how quickly people hate things and then get used to them because people
very
just
much
clearly don't
so.
like change. It's like the Slack logo. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So that was kind of been my argument against it, is just like, well, you have these markets for luxury high-end goods, things that are weird and crazy and different. And with a smartphone, like when you talk about your camera thing, like that's different because that's very much a hobby. Like that's somebody
mhm.
or a livelihood.
Yeah.
People want a tool that is very special and like has a particular set of attributes and features to help them
Yeah.
like either make their hobby more interesting or fun or fulfilling. I don't think there's anything more fulfilling about a foldable smartphone. I don't think the amount of productivity for most people probably would change either. I mean, I know that
Yeah.
Michael Fisher would like totally like go on a 20-minute rant about how the Galaxy Fold like enables all of these amazing new use cases, but I think for most people that's just never going to be true.
Mm.
So I'll be curious to see where all these form factor explorations, which I think is what they are for now. They're just experiments. They're just
Yeah.
experiments coming out as products.
I
So
mean, I think like 2019 was supposed to be that year where all these experiments became products, but then they got held back because of Samsung and Huawei having issues. But I would hope that maybe because now those are being fixed, 2020, which is, by the way, supposed to be the year of the future anyway,
yes,
we start seeing more interesting stuff.
yes,
So,
5G unfolding, and I'm sure we're going to hear so much 5G starting on Monday. I
oh
can't
yeah,
wait for all the
baby.
5G I'm going to be hearing about.
Every
Anyway,
year.
I think we should wrap this up here. Yeah, let's see here. On Twitter, or wait, no, I shouldn't do that first. I should do David. Where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. So my most populous platform that I'm on most of the time is Twitter. And on there, I am Dervid Imel, because my name was taken by some guy who was trying to be me and was asking companies for phones. So they shut his
Cool.
account. Yes. So they shut his account down and will not give it to me. And it's been 4 years since that happened, which is great. Uh, Otherwise, you can find me on Instagram on every other platform at just my name, which is David Imel. DavidImel.com is my website, and I also write for AndroidAuthority.com, and I run the YouTube channel for AndroidAuthority.com.
Wonderful. You can find all the topics we've talked about today at androidpolice.com/podcast. Again, we are live 4 times a week, 3 times for the show. That's Monday, Wednesday, Friday around noon Pacific. That's twitch.tv/androidpolice. Come on down, have a chat with us, ask questions. If you can't be on the live chat, totally understand. But if you still have questions that you might want to see addressed on the show, like we'll always take topic suggestions or your thoughts and opinions about the show, unless they're bad, in which case keep them to yourself. You can send us an email at podcast@androidpolice.com. That is podcast@androidpolice.com. On Twitter, I am RDRV3. Our producer, Jules Wang, is at Point Jules. Our theme music is by Home. I'm off to Hawaii, and so is David. And hopefully next week on Wednesday, I'll be able to bring you a hopefully live podcast with Daniel Bader of Android Central, who I've been wanting to have on the show. Until then, take care, have a great weekend, and join the rest of the crew on Monday.
Bye.